All right, thank you again for being here this afternoon. It's my pleasure to present to someone who's going to speak to us today about collaboration, the very thing that I was speaking about earlier, and how through collaboration we really can get more done and effectively serve the children and families of our communities. We have with us today Dr. Thea Lobel. She has a master's and bachelor's degree from LSU. She earned her doctorate or PhD in clinical social work from Florida State University. I won't hold that against her. She has, for the last 7 years, has partnered and worked with CASA and Children's Advocacy Centers in a variety of capacities, and really has a heart for abused and neglected children and working with professionals who work with abused and neglected children. I think she has a very powerful message for us today, and I really look forward to her sharing that message with you. So please help me in joining Dr. Thea Lobel.
Little Bobby had such a rough life. In his 10 years, he had experienced more pain and sorrow and heartbreak than many of us have as adults. He found himself at 10 years old in a foster home with a mean and cruel family. One night, after being locked in the attic, he escaped by sliding down a gutter. So at 10 years old, scared and alone, he ran to the only place he knew, the school that he went to. He spent the night huddled next to a garbage can, garbage dumpster, where he was found the next morning by one of his teachers. At that point, he was able to finally go to a new foster home. That next year, at age 11, he met Mae Morse. She was his caseworker, and she told him, "You are worthwhile." This is the first person that had ever told him anything positive about his life. And she gave him something that he would carry with him forever, and that was self-worth. Years later, he graduated from high school, and he went to work at the Albany Times-Union as an office boy. There he met Mary Mahoney. She told him, "You are full of promise." She set his course to where his life would be forever changed so that he could get to know the publisher of the Albany Times-Union. He met the publisher took him under his wing. 17 years after becoming an office worker, he became publisher of the Albany Times-Union. He then went on to become the head of Hearst Newspapers, one of the largest newspaper groups in the United States. And he served as CEO of the Hearst Corporation, as well as Vice President of Hearst Worldwide, which has media interest in magazines, newspapers, television, and cable news networks. And in doing that, he went from foster child to a very powerful CEO. He has done his work with humility. And in doing so, he exemplified what was right and good in humanity while having a tenfold cash increase for his company. So as we talk today about humility and its role in collaboration, I want us to think about why you're in this work. Are you in this work? Is there anyone in the room that's in here because you wanted to earn lots of money? Okay. Is anyone about driving big fancy cars because of all the money you're raking in helping abused and neglected children? No. So you're here for a reason, and that is for the children. And in helping the children, we can best help children through collaboration. And collaboration is bigger than just working with, say, CASAs and CACs. It also is you're collaborating every day with the folks you work with, and you're collaborating at home. So how did I come up with the big dogs don't have to bark? Let me set the stage. I was working on my PhD at Florida State University, and I had a doctoral program committee. John is familiar with what it's like to have a doctoral program committee. And I had on my committee, I had my major professor, Dr. Robin Perry. He was a young, up-and-coming, becoming well-known social work researcher. I also had on my committee Dr. Deborah Ebener, the past president of her national association. It was the Association for Rehabilitation Counselors. And then I had on my committee Dr. Bruce Thayer. Has anyone heard of Bruce in the room? We've got a few. He's the most famous social work researcher in the country on my committee. And then I had, let's call him Dr. James Doe. And Dr. Doe had never served on a committee before. He was a brand new, fresh out of school PhD. He was asked to be on my committee. I only needed 3. He was my 4th, as a favor for him to serve on my committee because he had never had the experience. Whenever I would have meetings with my doctoral committee, we would sit around, and it was supposed to be about my work. And what would happen is Dr. Doe would talk, and then talk, and then talk some more. And every time he talked, I got this visual. And I kept thinking about the neighbor's dog, which some of you may have those dogs. And it was just yipping and yipping and yipping about, I'm so big, I'm so tough, I'm so big, I'm so tough. And I thought, this is not right. And so I came up with, okay, I think there's got to be a better way for communication here. So let's look at humility and talk about some as far as, well, what is humility? What is not humility? Let's start with what humility is not. For those of you that can't see it, what the cartoon says is, what does he have to be falsely humble about? Have you ever known some of those people that go, oh, I am so humbled by that. That humbles me. And you know in your heart of hearts, there's not any humility going on right there. What they're doing is they're being falsely humbled. That is not what humility is. Humility is not being shy. It's not being meek. It's not taking a back seat. And so humility is not being dejected and having low self-esteem. It's also not the opposite of having exceedingly high self-esteem. Have you ever known anyone with defensively high self-esteem? These are those that will always tell you how great and wonderful they are. I happened to go to a conference with Dr. Doe, who was at the conference, and for his presentation, he was one of 3. He didn't even have his own slot. And he spent, of his about 15 minutes allocated, he spent the first 8 minutes talking about all he had done. And I was sitting next to someone, it was a stranger, but I mean, we're from South Louisiana, we talk to strangers all the time. And the stranger said, what's up with this guy? And is he going to just keep going on? And I was like, he's on my committee. So that is not what self-esteem, when we look at self-esteem, that's not what humility is. It's not low self-esteem, it's not exceedingly high self-esteem. What it involves is 3 steps. Self-awareness is the first step. Part of self-awareness is getting to know what our strengths and our limitations are. I'm in the process of researching and writing a book on big dogs. So what I've done is I am identifying who state and national leaders are who are humble. And I'm interviewing them. And one of the big dogs that I've interviewed that gave some insight on self-awareness is John Weibel. And in talking with John about his philosophy about supervision and leadership, he said his first step was becoming aware of who he was, who he is, and getting to know what his strengths are as well as his limitations, and acknowledging that. And I don't know about you, but I swear the smartest people that I've met, they're the ones that acknowledge that they don't know everything. Is that how, have you seen that too? And so he said he notices what his limitations are, and then whenever he's hiring staff, he hires people to complement him. And he said he hires the best staff that he can so that they can run with it. And they can run with the strengths that they have. And so doesn't that sound like a great team? But whenever we have people that have the defensively low self-esteem or defensively high self-esteem, they're so threatened by others that are capable, they end up forming very weak teams of people that are yes men and yes women. And it's only when someone has authentic self-esteem and is humble that one's able to say, you know what, I have strengths, I have limitations, and I'm going to hire the best team to make a team of strengths. So as we look at collaboration, I want you to think about looking in that way for the teams that you're building. The next is openness, and this is openness to new experiences and openness to feedback. Part of this is learning that we have strengths and we have limitations, and so there are going to be times we get some negative feedback, and that's okay. And to assimilate that and use that so that we can grow and become stronger. And lastly is service to others. Find out what others want and then give it to them. It seems so simple, but when we're working on teams or we're working with other organizations, we have to know what they want. Because we can't assume what someone else wants and then we give that to them and it could be something else. We tend to think that people think just like us, and guess what? They don't. And the only way we can know is whenever we ask. And we have to be open to rewarding people whenever they give us some positive feedback and they work hard. We want to reward them. And I had one big dog on my committee that was a super big dog. And his name is Dr. Bruce Thayer. In 2004, I had been working on my PhD for 10 years, which is a ridiculously long amount of time. Everyone in my life had basically written me off for that. And they had even told me, Thea, you need to even just quit saying you're working on a PhD because you're not. And I had a job that I was working about 70 to 80 hours a week. I don't know if you have some of those. And I got an email from my major professor saying, okay, Thea, it's time to fish or cut bait. Now, she was from the north, so she didn't quite say it that way. Her way is, you need to choose whether or not you're going to focus on your career or you're going to finish a PhD. It's time for you to make that decision. And after much thought and contemplation, I decided, okay, I really would like this PhD. So let me go ahead and continue on this path. And I quit my job. I got a job working half-time so that I could focus on the PhD as a result of her email. She then proceeded to email me and tell me that she could no longer be my major professor, and good riddance, basically. So that's where I found myself after totally changing my life, not believing I could finish this. No one in my life gave me any support other than my father. And so I saw an email that Dr. Bruce Thayer was coming. They were having a social work educators meeting in New Orleans, and Dr. Bruce Thayer was going to be there, and he had just been named Dean of the School of Social Work at Florida State. And I thought, well, let me go ahead and go, and I can meet him, because meeting Bruce Thayer for me was the same as a 13-year-old girl meeting Miley Cyrus. And I thought if I could just be in the room with Dr. Thayer, that would just be great, much less, meet him. So I went to his session, I introduced myself to him, and he asked me out for coffee so we could talk about my work. So I went for coffee with Dr. Thayer. he was very interested in my work, and he said, "How can I help you?" I said, "I don't know if anyone can help me at this point." And he said, "No," he said, "Do you want this?" I said, "I quit my job. Yes, I want this." And so he said, "I will be on your committee. I believe that Dr. Robin Perry should be your major professor, and we're going to get you through this." 18 months later, I was hooded. I walked across the stage at Florida State University, and I got a PhD. All because of that big dog. In my heart of hearts, before I had that talk with Dr. Thayer, I honestly did not believe I could do it. And I don't know if you've had times in your life where you've been so beat down and things have been so rough that you think, "I'm never going to get through this." And the children that you're working with every day, how many times are they going through that? And by having someone as special as Bruce Thayer saying, "Thea, we're going to get you through it," I thought, "Oh, well, if Bruce Thayer thinks it, well, then it must be true." And so think about, who can you be the big dog for? Who are you here to serve as their big dog? So there are 3 steps for collaboration with humility. The first is participative leadership. You notice it spells paw, so we're staying with the dog theme. Accept others for who they are and then work together. The first is participative leadership. You want to have shared power. So when you're starting to have collaborations and the organizations are working together, it's very important that you don't have one person that's doing all the work. My suspicion is there are some of you in this room that might be a little bit like me. Whenever you worked on group projects, were you the one doing the most of the work? Yeah. And so you kind of continue that as adults, and you think, well, I want it done right, so I'm better do it myself. You have to let go of that in collaboration. There has to be shared power. And while you may think, I'm helping this person out because I'm taking work off their plate, if you're looking for a collaboration, you're taking something off that plate is taking away power. So you want to make sure that whenever you're developing the collaboration, you're mindful of the work distribution so that people have power in the decision making and power in the actual day-to-day work. You also want to have time for participation in bonding as a group and getting to know one another. I recently led a retreat for the Jefferson Casa, and they were just an amazing group. And part of the humility is that they came together and they really shared with one another, and it was a team working together. And you saw there was full participation among every member of that team. That's how collaboration should work. Because there's 2 levels of collaboration. You have the intra-office collaboration, so in your particular agency, and then you have inter-office collaboration. And so that's whenever you have, say, the CASAs working with the CACs. And you have to have everyone sharing the power in those different levels of collaboration. And you want to accept people for who they are. When I was working on my master's and then my PhD, there's one theme that kept being hammered at us while we're working on how to be a good counselor, and that is you accept clients for who they are at that moment. Accept clients for who they are. And I think that if we take that, and while it started out with counseling, I think that we take that in the organizational sense, and we accept organizations for who they are, as well as individuals in the organizations for who they are, and without judgment, and we just accept them, then that's how we're able to move forward with collaboration. If we're not spending our time, energy, and effort judging that other organization. So the first is genuineness. This was a sign that I saw this summer on my honeymoon in Ephesus, Turkey. I thought it was pretty funny. Genuine fake watches. We don't want fake genuineness. The type of genuineness that we want is what I think is best exemplified by children. I mean, part of the reason that I would imagine you love working with children is, aren't they real? Yeah. Do children have agendas? No. Some do. I think little kids, their agenda is usually to have a happy life. And so most of the time, whenever they're happy, you can just see in their little eyes. Think about someone that you love. And a child that whenever they're happy, their little eyes crinkle. Can you picture that? That's the kind of genuineness you want in your collaboration and working with other organizations. You want to be true to your authentic self and then show that genuineness. People respond to that. And one thing is having the common goal of helping abused and neglected children. Everyone's coming from a good place. And so honor that good place in the other person and their genuineness with you being genuine also. I think this is exemplified in the work of Carl Rogers. You give people you provide people with unconditional positive regard without judgment. And so whenever you're working with others, to not judge them. And then to have empathy. And so many times when we talk about empathy, we always talk about, well, what's the difference between sympathy and empathy? I think part of empathy and communications and collaboration is celebrating the successes of others. Because so many times when you're doing work with abused and neglected children, do all of your cases always turn out good? No. And so what you have to do is to nurture yourself and nurture one another and have empathy and share in the successes of others. It's all the more important for those of you that are working with abused and neglected children to have a positive approach and celebrate the successes when they happen and savor them, truly be with them. Be mindful of everything that's going on around you and use all of your senses to celebrate what's going on that's great. And then when someone does something well, reward them for it. Tell them how great it is. And you can do this in your personal life too. My husband and I spend a fair amount of time away from one another. Both of us tend to be away from home due to our jobs. And so the way that we communicate and show that we care for one another is we send text messages during the day. Do any of you do that? Show of hands? Okay. We got some sheepish smiles. We might have some good text messages from y'all. So we send text messages throughout the day. And so one night I was actually kind of having my own little pity party because I was missing him and all of that, and I got this. He had gone to Outback to have dinner with his boss. And so he sent me a quick text saying, baby, I love you. This is the Outback Love Chicken. So I let him know. I just thought that was great and wonderful, and that's our joke, the Outback Love Chicken. And I can't even see an Outback without thinking about love chicken. And I let him know how important that was to me and how much that meant to me. And so because of that, and I rewarded that, he has done more of that. So when we're doing that with the ones we love, if they do something sweet, let them know how much that means to you. And if when you're working with people and they do something that's very touching, let them know how much that means to you. So let people know where they are and if they're touching you, how much they're touching you. We also have to look at working together and being open to new experiences and really being open with trust and intent that things are going to work out well. Whatever type of energy we give out is the type of energy we're going to get back. There was a man and his daughter that were walking down the beach one day. And as they're walking down the beach, a young man came and said, "Excuse me, sir, I just moved to town and I want to know, what is this place like? And what are the people like?" And the father said, "Can you tell me some about where you came from? What are the people like there?" And he said, "The people are horrible. They were nasty, they were backbiting, they were angry. It was bad, that's why I left." And the father said, "Well, sorry to tell you that, but that's pretty much how the people are here." So the father and the daughter kept walking. A few minutes later, a young woman came up, said, "Excuse me, sir, I just moved to town and I'm wondering, what are the people like here?" And he said, "Well, tell me a little bit about what the people are like where you left. And she said, well, I hated to go. The people were amazing. They were kind, they were thoughtful, they were warm, they were giving. It broke my heart to leave them. And the father said, that's exactly how you're going to find the people here. So as they're walking down the beach, the daughter was confused, and she said, Dad, how could you tell them that? And the dad said, we see the world not as it is, but as we are. The next step is implementation. What the cartoon says is there's a lot I want to experience, but not a lot I want to actually do. So as you're looking at collaboration, you want to make sure you have the implementation part, that we're actually doing work. I think a great example of working together is Bo and Budge, and they were vet dogs who were donated to the U.S. Army to work with veterans in Iraq to help them with stress. So they're working together to help them with stress. So as you're looking at which way you're going to choose in working with abused and neglected children, I want to highlight some of what Hope and Stephanie talked about earlier, that it's the obligation of both organizations to work together to help abused and neglected children, that when you're coming from the same place, and that's a place of giving and helping, that it's easy to work together. And I want to tell you, I went to, in July of 2008, I went to the National Speakers Association conference in New York City. It was my first visit to New York City. How many of you have been to New York City? Okay. And I keep always wanting to say New York City. So I'd gone to the National Speakers Association conference, and many of you have gone, and it was just an overwhelming, amazing experience. It was the best speakers in the country, I think one of the best cities in the country, and it was just a great experience. So the final night, on Tuesday night, we have a fancy black tie event where we have dinner. And I love getting all dressed up and putting on makeup and all of that good stuff. So I had gone that Tuesday night, had gone to dinner, I had sat down, and a woman sat next to me, and we started talking, and she said, so Thea, how was your conference, and what are your goals for the next year? Oh, this conference was amazing. I love it. It's just been one of the best experiences of my life. I want to write a book. I want to get it published by a major publisher, and I want to go on the Today Show. Do you know it's basically impossible to get published by a major publisher? And they don't let people on the Today Show unless they're well known. So do you really think those are going to happen? Oh. Okay, do you think she's big dog, little dog? Little dog. Never been published by a major publisher. Hadn't been published by a minor publisher either. Never been on TV. That was at 8 p.m. 8:15. Person sits on my right. We talk. So Thea, how was your conference, and what are your goals for the next year? Well, I would like to get a book published by a major publisher, and I'd like to go on the Today Show. Really? That's fantastic. I'm sure you can do that and so much more. Big dog, little dog. Big dog. Bonnie Tandy LeBlanc. Wrote my favorite parade column for 16 years. She's been on all of the morning shows. She was a regular on Good Morning America for 2 years. She's had 6 books published by a major publisher. Isn't it amazing? So as you're going through your life, I want you to think, are you a big dog or are you a little dog? Big dog, little dog. And I want to show you, and Bonnie provided me with lots of encouragement when I made my first national television debut on the Fox Morning Show with Mike and Juliet on Wednesday, November 19th, 2008. And that's because of a big dog encouraging me. So are you big dog or little dog? I want you to think about that. And to kind of help guide you along, I took some photos yesterday of some big dogs. You can clap and hoot and holler. Just want you to. Can you see? So today, who are you going to be the big dog for? I got it.
Dr. Thea Forrest, thank you.